an original narrative, created especially for Shadows of Love. Alessandra's fingers trembled around her wine glass as Nikolai's shadow fell across the bar counter, his presence commanding attention without a single word. The dangerous glint in his steel-gray eyes contradicted the gentleness of his touch when he moved her behind him, shielding her from the drunk patron, whose wandering hands had been seconds away from making contact. "This one is under my protection," he had said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made even the bartender lower his gaze in deference. She hadn't known then what those words truly meant. That his protection came with a price neither of them had anticipated, that his enemies would see her as his weakness, or that the most feared man in the city would risk dismantling his empire rather than risk losing her. All she knew was that something in her recognized something in him, like recognizing a storm on the horizon, beautiful, inevitable, and potentially devastating. The crystal chandelier of the obsidian cast prismatic reflections across the bar's polished surface as Alessandra Moretti claimed the only available seat. After a 12-hour day negotiating with artists for her gallery's upcoming exhibition, all she wanted was a glass of Cabernet and blissful anonymity. "Whatever she wants," a deep voice said to the bartender before she could order. "Put it on my tab." Alessandra turned to face the stranger beside her, a man whose presence seemed to command the very air around him. Dark hair swept back from sharp features, a tailored charcoal suit that whispered of wealth rather than shouted it, and eyes that assessed everything without revealing anything in return. "I can buy my own drinks," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. A hint of surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something resembling amusement. "Of course you can. Consider it appreciation for choosing the only empty seat in this establishment, which happens to be next to me." The bartender placed a glass of Cabernet before her without being told her preference. When she raised an eyebrow, he simply nodded toward the man beside her. "Mr. Vasiliev knows his regulars, ma'am." "I've never been here before," she countered. "But you ordered Cabernet at Bellini's last Thursday," the stranger Vasiliev said without looking at her. "You prefer art to conversation, Italian shoes to American. And you've checked your phone 3 times since sitting down, suggesting you're waiting for news you both want and fear." Alessandra stiffened. "Should I be concerned that you've been watching me?" "No more than I should be concerned that you immediately noticed my watch is worth more than most cars in this neighborhood." His lips curved slightly. "We all observe what interests us." She hadn't realized she'd been staring at his timepiece. "Touché, Mr. Vasiliev." "Nikolai," he corrected, finally turning to face her fully. The intensity of his attention felt like standing in direct sunlight after hours in shadow. Before she could respond, a clearly intoxicated man stumbled against her chair, his hand landing heavily on her shoulder. "Hey, beautiful, why waste time with this stiff when—" The drunk's words died abruptly. Nikolai hadn't moved, not visibly, yet something in his posture changed. The temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees. "You're interrupting a private conversation," Nikolai said, his tone conversational, but carrying an undercurrent that made the hair on Alessandra's arms stand on end. The drunk's face paled. "I didn't realize she was with you, Mr. Vasiliev. My apologies." He backed away so quickly he nearly tripped over his own feet. Alessandra watched him retreat to the far end of the bar. That was effective. "People tend to recognize when they've made a miscalculation," Nikolai replied, his attention returning to her with that same unsettling focus. "Alessandra Moretti, owner of Galleria Moretti on 5th Avenue, specializes in emerging artists with controversial perspectives." She set her glass down carefully. "Should I ask how you know that?" "The same way I know you graduated from Parsons, turned down 3 corporate positions to open your gallery, and recently acquired a Katerina Solov piece that several major collectors have been pursuing. That information isn't public. Very little truly is, if you know where to look." He sipped his whiskey. "Your reputation precedes you. You have an eye for talent that others miss." Despite her unease, Alessandra felt a flutter of professional pride. "And what's your reputation, Mr. Vasiliev, besides intimidating drunk men and memorizing strangers' drink preferences?" Something darkened in his expression. My reputation isn't suitable for pleasant conversation. The bartender appeared, refilling Nikolai's glass without being asked. The subtle deference in his manner spoke volumes. I should go, Alessandra said, suddenly aware of the currents moving beneath this seemingly casual encounter. You haven't finished your wine. I've lost my taste for it. She reached for her purse. Nikolai's hand moved toward hers, but stopped short of touching. I've made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. The sincerity in his voice made her pause. What was your intention? To enjoy a rare moment of normalcy, with someone who didn't approach me with an agenda. Something about his admission, the glimpse of loneliness beneath the composed exterior, resonated with her. Alessandra found herself settling back onto her seat. One more drink, she conceded. But I'm still not impressed by the watch. His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges. Noted. They talked for nearly an hour, about art, the city, travels to places they both loved. He listened when she spoke about her gallery with an intensity that made her feel truly heard. She found herself drawn to his measured responses, the careful consideration he gave each question, what they didn't discuss, his business, her past relationships, or why everyone in the bar seemed to give their corner a wide berth. When she finally gathered her things to leave, Nikolai stood as well. I'll walk you out. That's not necessary, nevertheless. He placed a bill on the counter that made the bartender's eyes widen. Outside, the night air carried the first hint of autumn. Nikolai flagged down a taxi with a subtle gesture that brought one immediately to the curb. Thank you for the conversation, Alessandra. He opened the car door, but maintained a respectful distance. It was refreshing. Good night, Nikolai. She hesitated before adding, perhaps I'll see you around. Something like regret passed across his features. Perhaps. As the taxi pulled away, Alessandra glanced back to see him still standing there, a solitary figure haloed by the bar's golden light. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Something that would change the course of her carefully ordered life. She was right. 3 days after meeting Nikolai, Alessandra noticed the black sedan. It appeared outside her gallery during the morning opening. Then again near her apartment that evening. The next day, it was parked across from her favorite cafe, always at a distance. Always with tinted windows that revealed nothing of whoever watched from within. Initially, she dismissed it as paranoia, an after-effect of her unsettling encounter with the mysterious Nikolai Vassiliev. But when her assistant mentioned that someone had called the gallery 3 times asking for her schedule, the coincidence became too significant to ignore. On the 4th day, Alessandra was reviewing shipment details for an upcoming exhibition when her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Don't take your usual route home tonight. Use the service exit. A car will be waiting. She stared at the message, fingers hovering over the screen to delete it, when a second text arrived. This isn't a request, Alessandra. You're being followed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she peered through the gallery windows. The black sedan was there. But now she noticed another car, a nondescript gray hatchback with 2 men inside, both watching her building with too much interest. She called the police. The officer who responded took her statement with professional courtesy, but obvious skepticism. Without specific threats or actions, Miss Moretti, there's little we can do. I'd recommend varying your routine and perhaps installing a security system. After he left, her phone chimed again. They won't help you. Meet my driver. Anger flared through her fear. She typed back, who is this? The response was immediate. You know who. Nikolai. Of course. Clutching her pepper spray, Alessandra slipped through the service corridor that connected to the neighboring building. A sleek black Bentley idled at the curb, its driver opening the rear door as she approached. She hesitated, one foot on the pavement, the other poised to run. Miss Moretti, the driver said quietly. Mr. Vassiliev insists on your safety. Where is he? Handling the situation. The vague answer sent a chill through her. What situation? Instead of responding, the driver nodded toward the gray hatchback, which was now pulling away from the curb, following another black sedan. That wasn't the one she'd noticed earlier. A diversion, he explained. Please, we must go. 20 minutes later. The Bentley pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering glass building in the financial district. The driver escorted her to a private elevator that required both a key card and fingerprint authentication. "Mr. Vasiliev will explain everything," he assured her before the doors closed. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nikolai stood at the window, his back to her, speaking quietly into a phone. When he heard the elevator, he ended the call and turned. "You're safe. That's what matters." His voice was tight, controlled. "Safe from what? Who were those men? Why am I here?" Alessandra demanded, her fear crystallizing into anger. "What have you done?" Nikolai's expression hardened. "What have I done?" "I've protected you from people who would use you to get to me. Get to you. Why would anyone?" She stopped as realization dawned. The deference at the bar. The way people moved aside for him. The obvious wealth that came with no visible occupation. "Who are you, really?" He approached slowly, as if giving her time to retreat. "I think you've already figured it out. You're not just rich. You're dangerous." A muscle in his jaw tightened. "To some." Alessandra backed away until she hit the wall. "Criminal. That's one perspective." His eyes never left hers. "I maintain order in certain sectors of this city. I have interests that sometimes operate in gray areas. And I have enemies who would happily use any perceived weakness against me. And I'm a weakness." The question came out sharper than intended. "You were seen with me. That was enough." He ran a hand through his hair. The first unguarded gesture she'd witnessed from him. "I didn't intend for this to happen. Our meeting at the bar was coincidence. But you knew who I was. I make it my business to know everyone in my vicinity. It's survival." Alessandra's mind raced through the implications. The men following me work for the Caravaggio family. They control territory to the north. We've maintained an uneasy peace for years. But recently, he shook his head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is they identified you as someone of interest to me. Because we shared a drink." His gaze intensified. "Because I walked you out. Because I smiled, something I rarely do in public. Because for 20 minutes, I forgot to be vigilant." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. "So what happens now?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You stay here tonight, where it's safe. Tomorrow, my people will ensure your gallery and apartment are secure. We'll establish protocols." "Protocols?" Alessandra interrupted. "This is insane. I can't just rearrange my entire life because some criminal organization thinks I'm important to whatever you are. A week ago, I would have agreed with you." Nikolai moved to a desk, retrieving a tablet. He pulled up security footage, showing 2 men breaking into her apartment, methodically searching through her belongings. "This was 3 hours ago." Her stomach dropped. "They were in my home, looking for leverage, information, anything to establish your value." His voice was gentle, despite the harshness of his words. "This isn't a negotiation, Alessandra. You've been marked because of me, and now I must ensure your protection." As the reality of her situation sank in, Alessandra felt a surge of helpless rage. "I didn't ask for any of this. Neither did I." For a moment, vulnerability showed through his careful composure. "If I could undo our meeting, spare you this intrusion, I would. But I can't change what's already happened." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only when his phone buzzed. Nikolai checked the message, his expression darkening. "What now?" she asked, dreading the answer. "They've made their first move." He turned the phone to show her a photo. Her gallery, its front window shattered, red paint splashed across the white walls inside. "This is a message to me." The sight of her beloved space defiled sent a wave of nausea through her. "My artwork can be replaced," he finished. "You cannot." The cold fury in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it kindled an answering anger within her. "What are you going to do about it?" Nikolai's eyes met hers, and in them she saw something dangerous and protective all at once. "Whatever is necessary." The safe house wasn't what Alessandra expected. Located on the top floor of a converted industrial building in a gentrified warehouse district, it was a study in minimalist luxury. Concrete floors softened by hand-woven rugs, floor-to-ceiling windows with bulletproof glass, and furnishings that balanced aesthetics with function. "This is yours," she asked as Nikolai's security team completed their perimeter check. "One of several properties not connected to my public portfolio." He gestured toward a hallway. "The bedroom is through there. I'll take the sofa." Alessandra wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their situation, despite the spacious apartment. "How long do you expect me to stay here?" "Until I've neutralized the threat." His tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. "And my gallery, my life." "My team is already handling the gallery restoration. As for your life..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Consider this a temporary adjustment." She laughed without humor. "A temporary adjustment? I'm hiding in a safe house with a man who is clearly some sort of criminal kingpin, because other criminals think I'm important to him. That's not an adjustment. That's a complete derailment." "Kingpin's melodramatic," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "I prefer businessman with unconventional interests." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No." His brief amusement faded. "Nothing about this situation should make you feel better. But you should understand the rules if you're going to survive it." The blunt statement sent a chill through her. Rules. Nikolai moved to the kitchen, retrieving 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. He poured a finger in each and offered one to her. "First rule. Trust no one except me and the 3 men on my security team you've already met. Anyone else who approaches you, even if they claim to work for me, is suspect until I personally verify them." She accepted the glass, but didn't drink. "Second rule. Don't attempt to contact friends or family. The Caravaggios will be monitoring all your usual connections, so I'm just supposed to disappear. People will worry. My assistant has already sent messages from your accounts citing a family emergency that's taking you out of town. Your gallery manager believes you're at an exclusive art retreat in the Berkshires. We've created a digital footprint to support the story." The calculated efficiency of it all made her head spin. "You've thought of everything. It's what keeps me alive." He took a sip of his whiskey. "Third rule. If I tell you to do something, move, hide, run, you do it immediately, without question. I don't respond well to commands," she warned. His eyes met hers, unflinching. "Then learn. Quickly. Because hesitation could get us both killed." The stark reality of her situation finally penetrated the shock that had insulated her. Alessandra sank onto a bar stool, the untouched whiskey trembling in her hand. "I don't understand why they care about me." We shared 1 drink. Nikolai set his glass down, maintaining a careful distance between them. "In my world, perception is reality. They saw something in how I interacted with you, something unusual for me. That made you valuable." "And what did they see exactly?" she challenged, needing to understand. He considered her for a long moment. Interest. Genuine interest. The admission seemed to cost him something. "I don't typically allow myself such indulgences." The intensity of his gaze made her look away first. "So where does that leave us now?" "Cohabitating with boundaries," he replied pragmatically. "I'll respect your space and privacy. You'll follow the security protocols. We'll manage until this is resolved. And if I decide I don't want to stay here, then I'll have you escorted to another secure location. But it won't be as comfortable, and I won't be there to ensure your protection personally." His voice softened slightly. "I don't expect your trust, Alessandra. I haven't earned it. But I am your best chance at emerging from this unharmed." The pragmatism of his approach, devoid of false reassurances or emotional manipulation, oddly reassured her more than platitudes would have. He wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. A dangerous situation requiring extreme measures. "I need clothes, personal items, already arranged. The closet in your room has been stocked with items in your size. Toiletries are in the bathroom. If there's anything specific you require, make a list." Of course, he'd anticipated even this. Alessandra finished her whiskey in 1 swallow, welcoming the burn. "Fine, I'll stay for now." Nikolai nodded once, accepting her conditional surrender. "There's a security panel beside your bed. Green button, connects directly to me. Red triggers a full emergency protocol." "What happens with the red button?" "Better if you don't need to find out. Over the next 3 days, they established an uneasy routine. Nikolai worked from a home office, conducting business through encrypted calls and messages. Alessandra was given a secure tablet that allowed her to manage gallery affairs remotely, without compromising their location. They shared meals in silence that gradually became less uncomfortable. She discovered his preference for strong coffee and classical music. He noted her habit of sketching while thinking, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. On the fourth night, she found him standing at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, tension evident in every line of his body. "Bad news," she ventured. He didn't turn. "The Caravaggios have put out feelers to other families, suggesting I've gone soft, that I have a weakness they can exploit. Me." Yes, Alessandra moved to stand beside him, careful to maintain the invisible boundary they'd established. "Tell me the truth. How dangerous is this situation? Really?" Finally, he looked at her, and the raw honesty in his expression took her breath away. "I've spent 15 years building a reputation that prevents violence through the mere threat of my response. If that reputation falters, everything collapses, including your protection of me. Including everything I've built to maintain order in this city." He turned fully toward her. "But know this, I will burn it all down before I let them touch you." The quiet intensity of his declaration hung between them, shifting something fundamental in their dynamic. For the first time, Alessandra saw beyond the dangerous exterior to the man beneath, a man whose rigid control masked depths she was only beginning to understand. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" Nikolai's gaze held hers, unflinching. "Because in my world, I can count on one hand the people who've looked at me without fear or agenda. You're one of them." Standing in the half-light with the city spread below them, Alessandra realized the true danger wasn't the threat outside. It was the growing connection between them. A connection neither had anticipated, and neither could afford. The news came at dawn, a message delivered by Anton, Nikolai's most trusted lieutenant. Alessandra, unable to sleep, had wandered into the kitchen to find the two men reviewing security footage on a laptop. "The Bianchi family has officially aligned with the Caravaggios," Anton reported, his voice low but carrying in the quiet apartment. "They're calling a council meeting. All 5 families." Nikolai's expression remained impassive, but Alessandra had learned to read the subtle tells in his posture, the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow night, neutral territory, the old cathedral." "They're making it formal then." Nikolai closed the laptop. "Prepare the usual security measures, and inform Yuri to move our overseas assets to the contingency accounts." Anton nodded, then hesitated. "There's more. The word on the street is that this alliance hinges on removing your distraction." Nikolai's eyes flicked toward the kitchen doorway, finding Alessandra standing there. Something flashed across his features, concern, perhaps regret, before his expression hardened again. "Leave us," he told Anton, who departed with a respectful nod to them both. Alessandra stepped fully into the kitchen. "I'm the distraction. Their perception, not mine." He poured coffee into 2 mugs, sliding one toward her. "The situation is escalating faster than anticipated." "What does that mean?" She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, seeking comfort in the familiar ritual. "What happens at this council meeting?" Nikolai considered her for a long moment, as if debating how much to reveal. "The 5 major organizations in this city operate under certain agreements: territorial boundaries, dispute resolution protocols, mutual non-interference pacts. A formal council meeting is called only when those agreements are being renegotiated or violated," she guessed. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "By protecting you so openly, I've given my rivals an opportunity to challenge my position. They're suggesting I've become compromised." "Have you?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider its implications. Instead of answering directly, Nikolai moved to the window, his silhouette stark against the morning light. "For 15 years, I've built my organization on rationality and calculated risk. Emotion has never factored into my decisions." He turned to face her. Until now, the admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. "So what happens next?" she asked, unwilling to address the deeper currents of his statement. "I attend the council meeting. I demonstrate that my judgment remains sound, and I make it abundantly clear that targeting you would be the last mistake any of them ever make." A chill ran through her at the cold certainty in his voice. "That sounds like you're planning for war. I'm planning to prevent one." He moved closer, stopping just short of the invisible boundary they'd maintained. "But I need something from you first." "What?" "The truth about what you want when this is over." The question caught her off guard. "I want my life back." "Your life before me," he clarified, his voice carefully neutral, "with me removed from it entirely." Alessandra set down her coffee, suddenly aware of how much had changed in the short time they'd been forced together. She'd seen sides of Nikolai that few ever witnessed. His dry humor over late-night chess games, his unexpected knowledge of Renaissance art, the gentle consideration he showed by remembering her preferences, without being told. "A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation," she admitted. "Now, I'm not sure what I want." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a tension releasing from his mouth. "That complicates things. I know. When this is resolved, there will be consequences to any continued association with me. My world doesn't allow for normal relationships." "Is that what this would be?" she challenged. A relationship, for the first time since she'd met him. Nikolai seemed at a loss for words. He closed the distance between them, one hand rising to hover near her cheek, without touching. "What exists between us defies simple definition," he finally said. "But it's real and dangerous for both of us." The admission broke something open between them, an acknowledgement of the current that had been building since that first night at the bar. "I should prepare for the council meeting," he said, stepping back. "We'll continue this discussion when I return." "If you return," she corrected quietly. His eyes met hers. "I always complete what I start, Alessandra." She watched from the window as Nikolai departed with his security team, his tall figure disappearing into a waiting vehicle. The apartment felt suddenly empty, the silence oppressive without his contained presence. Hours passed with no word. Alessandra tried to distract herself with work on her tablet, but her thoughts kept returning to Nikolai, facing his rivals who saw her as his weakness. Near midnight, her secure phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. "Your protector is occupied. The building's security has been compromised." 10 minutes. Terror froze her in place. This was what Nikolai had prepared her for. The contingency he'd hoped wouldn't be necessary. Moving on autopilot, she activated the emergency protocol with the red button, then retrieved the go bag he'd shown her from the bedroom closet. 8 minutes later, the apartment's lights cut out. Alessandra pressed herself against the wall beside the kitchen entrance, heart hammering in her chest. In the darkness, she heard the faint click of the service elevator, the one requiring security clearance that only Nikolai and his team supposedly possessed. The apartment door opened silently. Footsteps, at least 2 sets, moved methodically through the living area. "Check the bedroom," a voice whispered. "Remember, Caravaggio wants her alive." She held her breath, counting the seconds until the emergency response Nikolai had promised would arrive. But as a shadow appeared in the kitchen doorway, she realized help might come too late. The intruder's outline appeared, a gun visible in his hand. Alessandra gripped the heavy crystal paperweight she'd grabbed as a makeshift weapon, preparing to defend herself. Before she could move, the apartment's main door burst open. Gunshots, silenced but still audible, cracked through the darkness. A body fell heavily to the floor. "Alessandra," Nikolai's voice, tight with controlled panic. "Kitchen," she managed to call out, her voice surprisingly steady. He appeared in the doorway, gun still drawn, face a mask of cold fury that transformed to relief when he saw her unharmed. Without speaking, he crossed to her, one hand checking her for injuries, while the other maintained his weapon's aim toward the door. "Are you hurt?" The question came out rough, urgent. "No. I followed the protocol. Hit the button." Something fierce and approving flashed in his eyes. Good girl. In any other circumstance, she might have bristled at the patronizing phrase. Now she just leaned into his solid presence, allowing herself a moment of weakness. "The council meeting?" she asked. "A diversion," he replied grimly. "They never intended to negotiate. This was their real play, taking you while I was occupied elsewhere." The realization of how carefully orchestrated the attack had been, and how narrowly she'd escaped, made her legs weaken. Nikolai's arm tightened around her waist, supporting her weight effortlessly. "We need to move," he said, already guiding her toward the door. "This location is compromised." As they stepped over the bodies of her would-be abductors, Alessandra understood with sudden clarity that the careful boundaries they'd established had just been obliterated. The attack had transformed their tentative connection into something irrevocable. In the elevator descending to the secure garage, Nikolai finally holstered his weapon and turned to her fully. Without words, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd just enacted. "I almost lost you," he said, voice barely audible. In answer, Alessandra closed the final distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that contained all the fear, relief, and unspoken emotion of the past weeks. When they parted, something had fundamentally changed. The line they'd been so careful not to cross now lay behind them, and ahead stretched a path neither had anticipated, but both now seemed determined to follow. Dawn broke over the city as Nikolai's convoy arrived at their new sanctuary, a modernist glass house perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, isolated and heavily secured. Alessandra stood at the window, watching waves crash against rocks below, while Nikolai conferred with his lieutenants in the adjacent room. Their voices carried tense, urgent discussions about security breaches, countermeasures, and retaliatory options. She caught fragments that painted a grim picture. The attack on the safe house had been coordinated with simultaneous strikes against Nikolai's businesses across the city. The message was clear. The rival families were no longer content with threatening. They had declared open war. When the door finally closed behind his men, Nikolai joined her at the window. Exhaustion lined his face, though his posture remained rigidly controlled. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. "Bad enough." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, stubble rasping against his palm. "They've struck 3 of my legitimate businesses, targeted 2 warehouses, and attempted to turn my street captains with promises of territory. Because of me." "No," his response was immediate, brooking no argument. "This was inevitable. You were merely the catalyst they seized upon." Alessandra turned to face him fully. "What happens now?" Instead of answering immediately, Nikolai took her hand, leading her to sit on the minimalist sofa that faced the ocean view. The casual intimacy of the gesture, so different from the careful distance he'd maintained before, wasn't lost on her. "I have 2 options," he said finally. "I can respond with overwhelming force, eliminate the leadership of both families in one coordinated strike. It would end this conflict immediately, but trigger a power vacuum that would lead to chaos across the city." The clinical way he discussed what amounted to multiple assassinations should have horrified her. Instead, Alessandra found herself analyzing the strategy with unexpected detachment. "And the second option? I dismantle significant portions of my organization, transfer control of certain territories and operations to neutral third parties. Essentially, I reduce my footprint enough that I no longer represent the threat they perceive." His eyes held hers. "It would mean sacrificing much of what I've built over 15 years. Your empire," she said softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My carefully constructed house of cards, some legitimate, many not. Why would you even consider that option?" "Because it offers something the first doesn't." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "A future." The implication hung between them, weighted with possibility. "What kind of future exists for someone like you if you give up your power base?" she challenged. "I have resources they don't know about, investments, properties, connections that operate entirely outside my visible network." His gaze remained steady on hers. "Enough to disappear completely. To start over, if that's what I chose. And what would you be without all this?" "Just a man." The vulnerability in those 3 words struck her more powerfully than any declaration could have. a man who might have a chance at something he never thought possible. Alessandra's heart hammered against her ribs. You're talking about walking away from everything. Because of me. Because of what meeting you made me realize, he corrected. That I've spent 15 years building an empire that keeps me isolated from anything real, anything that matters. She shook her head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was suggesting. You can't make that decision now. Not when you're exhausted, when emotions are running high after what happened. I made the decision the moment I chose to protect you, instead of using you as a message to my enemies. He released her hand to cup her face gently. The question is whether you're willing to be part of whatever comes next. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Nikolai checked the screen, his expression darkening. What is it? She asked. Caravaggio is moving faster than anticipated. He's called for a meeting of all captains, including mine. He stood abruptly. I need to handle this now, before loyalty shifts any further. You're leaving. Alarm shot through her. After what just happened, this location is secure. My most trusted men remain with you. He moved to a painting on the wall, sliding it aside to reveal a safe. From it, he removed documents and a USB drive. If I don't return within 24 hours, everything you need is here. New identity, accounts, properties that can't be traced to me. The preparation sent a chill through her. You're talking like you might not come back. Nikolai paused, then crossed back to where she stood. Without hesitation, he pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair as his mouth claimed hers with an intensity that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I will do everything in my power to return to you, but I need to know you'll protect yourself if I can't. I can't just leave if something happens to you, she protested. You can, and you will. His voice hardened slightly. Promise me, Alessandra. The urgency in his tone convinced her more than his words. I promise. With a final caress of her cheek, he turned to leave, pausing at the door. Whatever happens, know that meeting you was worth everything that followed. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the crashing waves below and the weight of all they'd left unspoken. Hours passed like days. Alessandra paced the glass house, alternating between watching the security feeds and staring at the ocean. Nikolai's men maintained a respectful distance, their vigilance never wavering. As sunset painted the sky in fiery hues, her secure phone chimed with a message. It's done, all of it. Coming home to you. Relief crashed through her so powerfully she had to sit. Home. To you. The simple phrase contained multitudes. By the time headlights appeared on the winding road to the property, night had fully fallen. Alessandra stood on the front steps, heart in her throat, as Nikolai emerged from the car. Even in the dim light, she could see the cost of what he'd done etched in his face, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. But when his eyes found hers, something in his expression lightened. Is it over? She asked as he climbed the steps to reach her. Yes. He took her hands in his. Caravaggio is dead. The Bianches have accepted my terms, and I've begun the process of dismantling my organization. You're really doing it. Walking away. I've already started. He guided her inside, away from the night air. By this time tomorrow, the man known as Nikolai Vasiliev, the one they feared, will effectively cease to exist. And who will you be instead? His smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face. Whoever I choose to be. Whoever you'll accept. Alessandra studied him, seeing both the dangerous man she'd first met and the one who'd revealed himself to her layer by layer in the weeks since. I think, she said carefully, that I'd like to know all of you. Not just the parts you've shown the world, or even the parts you've shown me. Everything. Nikolai's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. That might take a lifetime. I have time, she whispered against his lips. If you do. His answer was in the kiss that followed, tender yet possessive. A promise and a new beginning wrapped in one. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm against the cliffs. A reminder that even the most immovable forces eventually yield to persistent pressure. Just as the most feared man in the city had yielded to the unexpected power of connection with the woman who'd seen beyond his carefully constructed facade. 6 months later, Alessandra stood in the renovated gallery space, making final adjustments to the lighting for the evening's exhibition. Sunlight streamed through the restored windows, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor, so different from the shattered glass and red paint that had marked the beginning of her journey with Nikolai. The Solov piece should be angled 3 degrees to the left. A familiar voice suggested from behind her. She turned to find Nikolai, or Nicholas Valen, as he was now known in public, leaning against the doorframe, in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater. He looked every inch the successful investment consultant he now presented himself as. Only those who knew him well could detect the vigilant awareness that still characterized his movements, the careful assessment he made of any room he entered. The artist specifically requested this alignment, she countered, though she moved to adjust the painting slightly. Something about the interplay of shadow and negative space. The artist isn't paying for the exhibition. His smile softened the critique as he crossed to join her. But you're right. It does look better from this angle. Alessandra accepted the concession with a raised eyebrow. High praise from a man who once owned 3 Rothkos. 4, he corrected, his hand settling at the small of her back. The 4th is in storage until our new home is ready. Our home. The casual reference to their shared future still sent a thrill through her. After the confrontation with the rival families, Nikolai had methodically reconstructed their lives, dissolving his criminal enterprises, while strengthening his legitimate businesses, transferring territories to neutral parties, and creating a new identity that could withstand the most rigorous scrutiny. Not everything had disappeared, of course. Certain connections remained, carefully maintained through trusted intermediaries. The power he'd wielded hadn't vanished. It had transformed, becoming more subtle, but no less effective. "How was your meeting?" she asked, noting the slight tension around his eyes. "Productive. The transition is nearly complete." He glanced around the gallery, ensuring they were alone before continuing. "Yuri has taken control of the Eastern Territory as agreed. The arrangement with the Bianches is holding, and the last of the offshore accounts has been converted to legitimate investments, and Caravaggio's people no longer a concern." The flat certainty in his tone required no elaboration. Alessandra had made peace with the darker aspects of Nikolai's past, and the calculated violence that had been necessary to secure their future. She neither celebrated nor condemned it. She simply accepted it as part of the complex man she'd chosen. "Will it ever truly be over?" she asked, the question that had lingered between them for months. Nikolai considered her question with the same thoughtfulness he applied to everything. "Not entirely. There will always be those who remember who I was, but with each passing month, that memory fades. Power, like everything else, has a half-life. And does that bother you? Watching your influence diminish?" He turned her to face him fully, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "What I've gained is worth infinitely more than what I've relinquished." The simple declaration, delivered without dramatic emphasis, carried more weight than flowery protestations ever could. It was Nikolai's way. Truth stripped to its essence, offered without embellishment. "The exhibition opens in 3 hours, she said, changing the subject before emotion could overwhelm her. "Will you be here?" "I wouldn't miss it." His thumb traced the line of her collarbone. "Though I can't promise to be sociable with the critics." Alessandra laughed. "Just try not to intimidate them into giving favorable reviews." "I make no promises." His smile, once so rare, now a regular gift, warmed his features. Some habits are harder to break than others. As they walked through the gallery, making final preparations for the evening, Alessandra reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first encounter at the Obsidian to the safe house, from danger to sanctuary, from careful distance to the intimacy they now shared, Nikolai had kept his word. He had dismantled his empire, piece by piece, preserving only what could exist in the light. The transition hadn't been without cost. There were still nights when he woke suddenly, reaching for weapons no longer kept beside the bed. Days when his vigilance intensified without apparent cause, his protective instincts surfacing at the slightest hint of threat. But there were other changes too. The gradual softening of his expressions, The increasing frequency of his laughter, the way he'd begun to speak of the future, as something to anticipate, rather than calculate. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her distant gaze. "About transformation," she replied honestly. "About how people can change, while remaining essentially themselves." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "You're wondering if I miss it. The power, the control." "I controlled everything except what mattered most," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I couldn't control how I felt about you. I couldn't control the fear of losing you. In the end, all that power was meaningless against that one truth." Alessandra leaned into him, public propriety momentarily forgotten. "And now I understand that true power isn't about controlling others. It's about choosing what controls you." His arms encircled her waist. "I choose this. Us. Every day." The gallery door opened, admitting her assistant with the printed programs for the evening. Nikolai stepped back smoothly, resuming the appropriate distance for Nicholas Valen, respectable businessman and partner to the gallery owner. "I should go," he said, checking his watch. "Final security checks for tonight, and I need to change." "Don't be late," she warned. "And remember, no intimidating the art critics," he finished with a mock salute. "I'll behave, mostly," as he left. Alessandra watched the controlled grace of his movements, the subtle authority that still marked him, despite his transformation. Some things hadn't changed: his protective instincts, his strategic mind, his absolute commitment once given. But where once those qualities had been directed toward building and maintaining an empire built on fear, they now focused on constructing something neither of them had believed possible. A future unbound by the shadows of his past. That night, as the exhibition opened to acclaim, and the gallery filled with patrons, Alessandra caught Nikolai's eye across the room. In that moment of silent connection, she recognized the truth they'd both discovered through fire and fear. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room becomes the safest harbor in the storm, and sometimes a chance encounter at a bar changes everything. Not because fate demands it, but because two people recognize in each other the possibility of redemption neither knew they sought.